I was just about to get ready to attempt to have a swim and turned around and saw Shanan on that wave, and it was amazing. But then he was just cartwheeling down the face. It just really engulfed him. And so I wasn't really prepared at that time to go in. It was nearly like a moral dilemma, watch Shanan drown or go in and do the rescue. But we did find ourselves in there. But this was now 2 waves have gone through. So Shannon's now had a 45-second hold down, I would say. And I was actually expecting someone else from the channel, because the channel was packed with so many other skis to go in and do it that were more prepared. They looked more prepared. They had wetsuits on and stuff like that. I was still fully clothed. I don't really want to fall off the ski. And then, I just went into where I thought he would pop up, just from past experiences. And we managed to get him on the ski before the third wave. And like Shanan said, that would have been, a far different scenario.
G'day, and welcome back to Real Risk, the adventure podcast. Now, for those who enjoy video podcasts, I've engaged with Podbooth here in Adelaide to produce the show, and I'm really excited about how it's going to work. For those who listen in the car or on your daily walk, the audio files, of course, will still be available. My name's Richard Harris, and you might remember me from my involvement in the 2018 Thai Cave Rescue. Well, that adventure has led to many other exciting opportunities, including the chance to chat with like-minded adventurers and risk-takers on this podcast. There's lots of exciting things to announce over the course of the season, and plenty of brilliant, daring, adventurous and thoughtful guests already lined up. There'll be more extreme athletes, more divers, more soldiers, more people who get off on going fast, climbing high or challenging themselves in ways most of us can't even dream of. And all of them will talk to us about why they think the benefits outweigh the dangers. Why risk is integral to making us stronger, more resilient and better able to cope with the stresses of daily life. And let's face it, when has that ever been more important? G'day, and welcome back to the Real Risk podcast. I'm definitely starting to feel more comfortable with this video format, and I can see that plenty of you are having a look as well as listening to the audio version. Now, the easiest way to find the video is to search for Real Risk Podcast on YouTube and then subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Easy. Now, today I've gone completely mad and I've invited not one, but 2 guests to the show. So old mate Rory over there behind the scenes is going to be a very busy boy, switching his little dials and controls and setting up great shots for us. The southwest corner of Western Australia is famous for stunning scenery. I'd reluctantly admit the world's best beaches, massive surf and extraordinarily large great white sharks. All these elements form the common thread that brought these 2 guys together. Russell Ord from Esperance is a world-class surf photographer whose big wave images reveal the beauty and pure dramatic power of the ocean to those of us who are not quite brave enough to paddle out ourselves. And his mate, one of the athletes who challenge themselves on these multi-story monsters, is surfer Shanan Worrell. But there's a lot more to the story here than a couple of surfies out for a day in the water. I hope you enjoy the show. Well, big welcome to both of you. Shanan Worrell, big wave surfer, all the way from Margaret River, I believe. G'day to you.
Hey, how you going?
Good, mate. Are you in Margaret River at the moment?
And just a little bit further north, so we're just up near the Dunsborough area.
Russell Ord, big time surf photographer. I nearly said underwater photographer. That's me. I'm the big time underwater photographer. Russell, thank you very much for joining us as well.
No, thanks for having us both. Yeah, you're definitely the underwater photographer. I've looked at some of your shots. I'm definitely not getting those type of shots, that's for sure.
Well, I think I'd say the same for what you do. I think I've actually always wanted to have a go at surf photography because it kind of looks a bit easier, but there's a whole world of worry and danger out there that I don't think I'm ready to face. So I'll be interested to pick your brains a little bit on the techniques and the equipment and stuff. What came first for you, the photography or the surf, or which way around?
Oh, it's definitely the surf. Yeah, I've been surfing since I was like 5 and only really got into the photography because I got injured surfing and just picked up a camera basically and started shooting mates.
How long ago was that?
20 years ago now. It's been going for a while. So yeah, just picked up the camera, started shooting mates, and it basically took off from there.
So you still do a bit of surfing?
Well, I'd like to say, yeah, I was surfing 2 or 3 times a day up until early last year, but I dislocated my shoulder, so I've had a shoulder reconstruction and a number of surgeries, so I've been out of the water. I actually surfed this morning. I don't know if you'd call it a surf. It was like a learner surf.
Yeah, so Shannon, let's talk to you about your surfing. When did that start for you? I think I've read that you've been in the water pretty much since the same sort of age as Russell.
So where I was brought up was down in Esperance, right down on the south coast, just before the Great Aussie Bight. And the nature down there is just next level. It's very pristine and just such an amazing environment to be able to have that as your backyard and grow up down there. So we were surfing, diving and fishing from a super early age. I had my first big boat when I was 16, so I didn't even have a license. And I remember my dad reversing in this 21-foot boat with twin 85 motors on it, saying, "Don't go too far." So it really was, orientated around the water.
Does surfing pay the bills for you, or do you have to have a real job as well?
No, definitely have to have a real job. There's probably not that many people in the big wave game making a living. It's probably only the top. I don't know, what do you reckon, Audie? Top 5 or 10% that actually probably make a living?
Yeah, they'd be pushing it for sure.
Definitely for me. It's just I started as a hobby, and just I think because we'd been around the ocean for so long, I think it wasn't an immediate jump. It was just incrementally, pushing the limits just a little bit further and a little bit further. Weren't really travelling with photographers or anything, but I was surfing a few of the breaks that were really well known for being big wave spots, and a lot of the international guys had come in and fly. So because I was in that kind of arena, surfing the same kind of waves, a few photos got taken, and that's probably, to be honest, why I'm a little bit more well known on the big wave front, not through the profession of chasing down big wave surfing as such.
So Shannon, I'm quite interested about this relationship between the photographer and the surfer. Having both of you on the show at the same time is a good opportunity to explore that. And so for the surfer, is the photographer primarily an annoyance to be, you don't want to run them over and they're in the way, or are they the guy who can make you famous and actually, create a career for you potentially if that's what you're inclined to do?
It depends what surfer you ask, I think. It's very much Audie and my relationship. I don't know. It was a long time ago, wasn't it, Audie? It might have been 20 years ago. So I'm probably a bit more of a, like I said, I haven't ever chased a career in surfing. So we were probably trying to protect our backyard when I first met Audie, and we didn't really want surf photographers to come down to our waves that no one knew about. So that was my version of surfing to start with. But then later on, as I've done a bit more, going to a few of the more well-known breaks, yeah, it's awesome to have the photographers there and be working with them. And
yeah, well, I've heard you talk on another podcast about this clash between wanting to protect secret and fantastic sites and therefore not wanting any photography really done there because you might expose the headland or something, I presume, that you can see in the distance and people go, aha, I know where that is. Or versus, seeing yourself on the front cover of Surfing Life or Tracks or something like that. That's kind of nice to see a nice photograph of yourself, I imagine, especially in a barrel or something like that.
All of us have got a little bit of ego, in some way, shape or form. So it's nice to see a photo of you somewhere or to get a bit of acknowledgement for some of the things that you've been doing.
You've got plenty of coastline to choose from in Western Australia in particular. So is that still a reasonable expectation or hope for yourself and for your kids that they'll find a break that no one might have surfed before?
Well, there's plenty out there still, for sure, definitely. I think in West Oz in particular, we've got a pretty big expanse of waves and islands and bits and pieces. So there's a lot of angry stuff out there that people just don't want to go near as well too.
Russell, from your point of view as a photographer going out into the breaks, what's the reception generally like?
It's pretty good. I'm only really working with crew that in these particular waves that would do it without a camera in the first place. So they're just doing it for the love. There's been plenty of times where, you get called up by young up-and-coming surfers that want to go and shoot this wave, but they haven't really, what we would say, jump across the T's and dotted the I's. So I'm just working with guys that really love to do it anyway. They would be toe surfing with or without the camera, like Shannon just said.
With the big wave surfing, Russell, obviously there's often tow craft out there, jet skis, and it's pretty different. You're a long way offshore sometimes. Are you usually in the water taking photos on those sort of breaks, or do you tend to sit on the back of a jet ski?
The first 7 years, I was just sitting on the ski and just shooting every single moment, but I just realised how I actually broke my leg, and through those circumstances, I just wanted to change the way I shot, and then I wanted to shoot from the water, because I'm a surfer myself, and you don't really get the feeling of a surfer sitting on the back of the ski and shooting every moment. You've got to have the hold downs, you've got to have the wipeouts yourself. So that's why I started shooting from the water mostly. And when I look at my own work now, it's all those type of shots that I can look back and see effort. So they're the kind of shots I like taking.
It might be a dumb question. Do you wear a mask when you're shooting from the water?
No, not at the big wave spots. I try to keep all the gear to a bare minimum, because all that sort of stuff to just get ripped apart. I'll wear a mask if I'm trying to shoot in places like Tahiti and it's only a couple of feet and I'm doing underwater shots. But no, it's just your camera. I'll wear a vest, a safety vest, and a helmet.
Yep,
ready to go.
Do you lick the dome port or the port on the camera to keep the water off it? Is that still the go? Yeah,
that's still the trick. With the wide angle, just keep licking that port.
Yeah, excellent. I wonder if you run out of saliva. I do that a lot when I'm taking photos and so forth in caves, because you get a lot of fog and mud and dirt, and I find myself licking my camera all the time, and I often think I'd rather be in the surf at that point. I think I can tell, looking at great surf photos, Russell, when the photographer is in the water and, you're kind of almost below the level of the surfer sometimes, and you see that footage of the surfer go past, and the photographer sort of ducks just in front of them, and you often wonder how often do they end up going up the face of the wave and coming a cropper over the top. Is that all on the timing, I guess, Russell?
It depends where you are. You can go over the falls at the right quite a few times if you push the limits, but at that particular spot, I'm only going to try for the photo when I'm pretty much 90% sure I'm going to get it. Otherwise, I'm just going to duck under and not bother with the effort. But yeah, I've been over the falls numerous times.
When did you guys first meet?
Like Shanan was just saying, how he wants to protect his waves. It would have been just a phone call like 20 years ago when he must have heard that I was sniffing down his neck of the woods, and he just wanted to make sure that that I wasn't.
Warned you off, did he?
Yeah. Got the warning. So it's quite ironic how we're such good friends now, and we do a little bit of work together. But it's but I can definitely see his point, because I'm the same. I'm a surfer myself, and I love to keep it quiet. And even as a photographer, the last thing I want to be doing is shooting with 10 other photographers all getting the same stuff. So I was pretty secretive myself and still am. But yeah, that's probably the first time we met.
Shanan, I don't know how you ever make any friends if you're going to ring people up like that and be nasty to them.
Yeah, a little bit younger, a little bit more, what would you say, a little bit more spunk back in the day.
And one of the stories I understand that, cemented your bond as mates and watermen was when you came a bit of a cropper, Shanan, at this pretty gnarly break called the Right.
I'd kind of, it was at a stage where Russ had imported a breath hold guru to come and upskill, and it was when Russ, just before he might have been while you were shooting the documentary, Russ, One Shot, but I know we'd been doing a heck of a lot of training, and then this big day came along, and it's not often that all the conditions link up for a big mega day when it comes to surf, like the wind, the swell, so you don't get too many opportunities per year to really get what you're looking for. And this day came along, and we ended up heading down to the south coast of WA to this spot, and got out there, and it was probably one of the biggest days I've seen it still now. But the conditions were perfect, and there was a heap of nervous tension. Normally you rock up and, it's big. There's always people being a little bit nervous, but this day was just really noticeable. I don't think anyone was surfing. There might have been one other guy. It just got in, and it was early morning. One of these waves came in and the horizon just kind of blackened out. And I hadn't looked at it for too long that morning because it was that big that I knew it had psyched me out. So we ended up pretty much deciding just to go for it. And I jumped on the back of the rope behind the jet ski, got propelled into this massive lump of water, And I thought it was going to be the best one I've ever had. And I just got absolutely lit up. At the right in particular, there's a heap of distance between the surface and actually where it draws out the wave. So you can be up to maybe, I reckon probably about 10 to 15 metres instantly as soon as it closes over. And then there's a rock where all the water rolls down and it pushes you down even deeper. So it's a really deep water wave, and instantly that pressure, you dive in, your eardrums want to burst immediately. So as soon as you fall off there, you've got to be going for your nose to try to equalise. Otherwise, your eardrums are going to go straight away. And this one wipeout in particular was really violent. It was so early in the day and no one was really, I guess, ready to come and do a rescue. And Russ was there with his son on the back. How old was Kalani at the time there, Russ?
He would have been 16.
Yeah, because I remember, there's that photo of you guys on the back and it was from that day. I know Kalani's looking pretty young there, but Russ is in his clothes still, Kalani's still in clothes, not geared up. And then Russ has actually come into the impact zone, which is hectic. There's all this turbulent water running around. The jet skis aren't getting clear water due to all the bubbles and water movement. So they bog down. So Russ has come in there. Catherine's not watching or anything in the background, is she? She probably doesn't need to hear this story. It's Russ's wife. With Kalani on the back, and he came and got me out of the water there, and I was not in a good way at all. So I was very fortunate that Russ acted on instinct and just came in and got me there.
Yeah, so I got there a little bit later because I was going through some last minute preparation with my son, and I was just about to get ready to attempt to have a swim, and turned around and saw Shanan on that wave, and it was amazing. But then he was just cartwheeling down the face. It just really engulfed him, and so I wasn't really prepared at that time to go in. It was nearly like a moral dilemma, watch Shanan drown or go in and do the rescue. But we did find ourselves in there. But this was now 2 waves have gone through. So Shannon's now had a 45-second hold down, I would say. And I was actually expecting someone else from the channel, because the channel was packed with so many other skis, to go in and do it that were more prepared. They looked more prepared. At least they had wetsuits on and stuff like that. I was still fully clothed. I didn't really want to fall off my ski. And then, I just went into where I thought he would pop up, just from past experiences. And we managed to get him on the ski before the third wave. And like Shanan said, that would have been, a far different scenario. Best case scenario would have been a resus, and worst case, he wouldn't be here talking today. So, and then we just got him back in the channel, and was just another day.
And was he conscious enough to help get himself back on the back of the ski, or?
Yeah, it was good to have my son there. He could give him a little bit of a hand. He was conscious enough, but I don't know if I would have been able to get him up and himself up by himself. So having my son there just help him drag onto the back of the sled, because we've got a rescue sled on the back of the ski, but mine also had a big Pelican with all my camera gear. That's where I put all my camera gear. That's why. And so there wasn't a hell of a lot of room, and we probably only had 10 seconds at the most to get him up. Otherwise we would have had to leave, or we would have been copping it as well. So it was a quick rescue, that one.
And what happened after that? Was there more surfing for you, Shanan, that day?
Yeah, I did. It was one of those learning lessons I probably shouldn't have, because I was definitely concussed at the time or afterwards, and I should have just hung up the boots.
What about you, Russell? Have you had any, I'm sure you would have had some significant wipeouts, but have you had any near misses in the surf?
I had one in particular where I decided that this is right at the start of my photography career, when I wanted to shoot big waves, and I had this brainwave of getting like a 300 mil in a water housing, because no one's ever done it, and I thought I could just paddle out on my bigger surfboard I had, sit in the channel and start shooting. And back then there was only really one tow team in Margs, Courtney Gray, Damon Easto. These guys used to tow Margs Bommy, and so I paddled out there, put the camera, this is a film camera as well, 300 mil. this obviously is going to sound so dumb now when I say it, but I thought I'd just put it in a backpack, put it on my back and paddle out in the surf, and then kind of just like the whole bay closed out, and these guys didn't even know I was there. I remember going down to the bottom, but I also remember thinking to myself, and this is pre-breath hold training and stuff like that, but I had surfed thinking, oh, don't drop the backpack because I've got my camera gear in there. And then I was like, oh, no, I'm going to have to drop it just to get back up to the surface. And I think I took a little bit of salt water in when I just got to the top, and it was kind of I never did it again. It was definitely a lesson, but I got home and I told my wife that I'm going to have to buy a jet ski to shoot this stuff because it's, I've got to join what they're doing.
So I just want to ask both of you, I'll start with you, Shanan. This podcast is about risk. As someone who, does a sport that is perceived as dangerous, I'm going to say right now, compared to what you guys do, I think cave diving is the safest sport in the world. You're going out there, you have experiences like this, you see people around, you have accidents and no doubt, you've been around when there's been fatalities if you've been around big wave surfing long enough. For you, Shanan, what's the benefits of doing this stuff? Not just to you, but if your kids asked you to, let them do it one day, what do you think of the benefits compared to the obvious risks of these kind of activities?
I've probably had to be really honest with myself too. If you get it wrong, or not even if you get it wrong, just the scenarios we do, I guess, put ourselves in. The outcome is potentially death, which you can't hide from those questions. For a long time as I was growing up, I had a few, I guess you'd say, traumatic experiences when I was younger. So there wasn't any conscious thought into moving into big waves or taking those risks. There was no calculation because for myself, I didn't really mind what the outcome was, as crazy as that sounds, when I was a bit younger. Now I have, a beautiful wife, 2 little kids. Yeah, to have to ask yourself, is this worth it? And do you really want to be doing this? And why are you doing this now? And when you were younger, there was probably a little bit of ego involved as well. I think now, and the reason why I think Russ and probably myself, I can't speak for Russ, but the reason I keep on putting myself in high-risk situations is because in those moments, I guess, where you are having a bad one, for instance, the wipeout scenario, or those traumas in life, or monumental things that are shaping you, I think that is actually living, and that's where the most growth that you'll ever have is actually in your life. And when you can reflect on those moments and learn, and then hopefully, like nowadays, pass on through your experiences what you've learned, then that can be of benefit to others.
In fact, you're not only sort of embracing that philosophy, but you're doing your bit to teach and mentor younger surfers, from what I understand, with sort of management of big wave surfing and safety and stuff. You're running some courses along those lines?
Yeah, we try to run some heavy water courses. I think we became aware that, we're in the wild, wild west over here, and I've been a part of it very much so, from the beginning, where we were just shooting from the hip, and there was means to take down the risks and minimise them a bit, and we just weren't utilising them. And as a culture in WA and WA surfing, I think, bravado and risk-taking is looked upon as being cool, almost. And I guess that culture probably leads to more people getting hurt, basically. So we probably tried to shift the culture, and in the process of trying to shift the culture a little bit so that everyone's looking out for each other. They're taking the risk still, but have the skill set and the apparatus and the safety equipment to be able to actually execute on a high level and still get everyone home.
Yeah, it sounds like both of you guys have done a lot of training outside of just, hitting the waves with your breath hold training and physical training. And clearly at this level and these sort of waves, you have to be an athlete. You have to apply yourself. You can't just, go for a surf and then chug a few beers afterwards. You have to really throw yourself into this in a pretty serious way as the stakes have gotten higher and higher, I guess, over many years with toe-in surfing and bigger waves being tackled. Russell, it's going to be hard to beat Shannon's answer on this, I suspect. But that was fairly eloquent. I was thinking about my answers to those sort of questions sometimes and feeling a bit inadequate. But let me rephrase the question somehow for you so you can tackle it from a different way. Maybe you're probably like me. I suspect that you occasionally come under the withering stare of loved ones. One in particular who sort of queries why you're doing stuff that would put you at risk. And I personally often feel quite selfish about my pursuits. And how do you justify that to yourself when you get that look from a certain someone?
Yeah, I don't actually get any of that because maybe my wife doesn't really even know what I do, like the full extent of it. It's only really when the introduction of social media and the internet, when people will take a shot of me doing what I do as well, that she probably got a full understanding. But I really try to push the journey on, like, not jumping different stages. So I actually don't see it as that risky because it's just, there's risk management, and I think we do that so well that the risk just comes down, and it's that combined with experience that I find it's not really a risky thing. For me, the first time I ever shot water at the right, people thought it was the craziest thing ever, but it wasn't really, because I'd done so much preparation, and that's what I really want to push to my kids. So, I'm not worried if they want to do risky things in their life. My oldest son's probably the craziest one of the lot, who surfs as well and surfs pretty big waves. But it's just as long as he's done everything he possibly can to minimise the risk, I'll be happy, because there's, like Shannon said, there's far too many cowboys to get it. They get a jet ski and all of a sudden they're towing 20-foot waves, and basically, in my opinion, that's why that guy got drowned. He pretty much was going to drown because they wanted to get social media shots. It just doesn't make sense. So I'm really pushing that angle for my kids.
A little bit earlier on, I referred to you both as watermen. What does that term mean to you, Russell?
For me, it's probably being good in the water at a lot of things. Would I call myself a waterman? I think I'd be close. There's a lot of things I do pretty well in the ocean, but an all-round waterman is that's how it sounds. Like you're a good surfer, you're a good diver, you're a good swimmer, but you've got a really good understanding of the ocean, I think, and that's the bit that takes the experience and the years. And with the photography side of things, the photography part is really the easy part. It's the experience and being in the ocean for the last 35 years is why I can do what I can do.
What about you, Shannon? Is that a word that's important to you? Do you think it describes what you do?
Yeah, it's probably might not be important to me, but yeah, the word I think itself, I guess it's multifaceted, where you're comfortable in the ocean and the environments, and it doesn't matter what watercraft you're in, whether it be a boat or a surfboard, or that you're comfortable in the ocean, and I guess have the tools or the mindset to be able to deal with what comes your way.
Well, I remember when I learnt to dive in the late 70s, and the people I revered were these people who I thought of as watermen, all boating, all fishing, all diving kind of guys. Surfing really wasn't part of my world back then, I suppose, so I should have added that into the mix. But these people grew up in the water. They were Spearos first, they were snorkelers, and that's kind of how I started out before I even thought about putting on a scuba tank. And the courses, even the open water course back then, was quite tough. It was a fair dinkum thing, and people wouldn't take it up unless they'd kind of grown up as snorkelers and divers, I don't think. And these days, for partly for better, partly for worse, it's an amazing opportunity open to anyone, including people with disabilities, and from all walks of life. You can do a pretty quick course or an easy scuba diving experience, and it's wonderful that the ocean is opened up to so many more people. But at the same time, we've lost some of that inherent sort of skill and background that makes people safe and comfortable in the water. So it's great to talk to guys who have probably come from families where that's just all second nature, and you've continued that tradition, and I presume your kids probably will too if that's something they enjoy. So touching on spearfishing, because I think we've all enjoyed a bit of that by the sounds of things over the years, and inevitably that leads to the discussion about sharks, which has been a fairly formative part, particularly for you, Shanan, which has led on to some business opportunities as well, which we'll touch on in a minute. But we'll start with Russell, because your story is a bit longer, I think, Shanan. But Russell, what's your experience with sharks as a surfer, as a photographer, and perhaps as a spear fisherman?
I remember the first shark, the real first shark experience I had was actually up north with a tiger shark, and that had come out on the charge. And I always thought to myself that I was going to be, this is what you do if a shark comes up, and this is years ago, and I'm going to punch it in the nose and I'm going to do all this. Well, none of that happened. It was basically, I was like a little kid when you're 5 years old and thought there was a monster coming into your room, and I just put my head under the sheets. I basically just turned around thinking it was all over, and then the shark just stopped about half a metre away from me and went in the face of the wave. But there's only three of us in the water, and the experience changed all of us. Like, a couple of the others went and were looking at painting black and white stripes on their boards and all sorts of things. But it was just in the end for me, it was a lesson in how I acted in that situation and never to let that happen again. Like, obviously being around Shanan and hearing his experiences has given me a little bit more of a mindset when something happens. And we've had a few sharks come up, and I'm way more prepared, and I'm putting my head under the water, I'm looking at them and stuff like that. But they've just been bronzies and stuff. It's not like Shanan can swim with great whites. I'm not sure if the great white thing, I might be that little kid in the blanket again with a great white.
I'm worried that bronze whalers aren't smart enough to recognise that you're staring them down, and they'll just bite you anyway. Whereas at least a great white shark might be intelligent enough to know that you're standing up to them. Shanan, obviously you had a dreadful experience with Greg Pickering when you were abalone diving, and I can certainly remember hearing that story in detail because it was pretty epic, impactful in the Australian media. Just tell us what happened on that day.
Yeah, there's been a handful of days in my life where you have events that probably shape a lot of what you do and who you are. That's definitely one of them. So, having a love for the water and being brought up down in Esperance, moving into a bit of ab diving here and there was a pretty obvious kind of, I guess, career move. And yeah, so Greg, he's an amazing guy in the water. I think he holds a couple of world records still for spearfishing. So he's really well known on that front, and more so now for having 2 shark attacks and survived them both. But on that day in particular, I can't remember the amount of time, but it had been a fair while. We were out a place called Poison Creek, and it's probably 120 k's or so east of Esperance, give or take. It's an hour down a full drive track and probably, an hour by road as well. And so when we're ab diving in those remote areas, it's quite a logistical manoeuvre. Like, we move out caravans, tractors, big boats, and we're beach launching big boats from the beach. So, and we might camp out for maybe, a month to 2 months at the different locations before moving to different places. So we hadn't seen anyone for quite a while. And then this one morning, I think it was the first morning, Greg and young Callum came and they moved in beside us. So we were stoked. We were happy to have a bit of company because I was with Andrew Rowe and myself, another ab diver from Esperance. And it was good and bad. Good we had company, bad that Greg probably hadn't done as much diving down there as what we had. So we pretty much were pretty sure he was going to follow us around. If you're ever seeing this, Greg, you shouldn't follow our guys around, mate. A bit of instant karma that day. I don't know if that's too soon or not, but no. So we ended up probably 20 k's up the coast from the beach launch. It's in the middle of nowhere, pretty much, out near Cape Arid National Park, and I've received some pulls on the hooker hose. There's compressed air from the boat going down to the diver underneath, and the diver's sitting, chipping away abalone. And it was only at the start of the day. I think I was on my first dive, and Andrew was just driving the boat. And I've got the emergency signals of repeated pulls on the hose, and you instantly, it's one of two things. It's either your air supply is going to run out or there's a big bitey around. And so we've started to emergency ascent, spinning as I'm coming up, just to make sure nothing was going to hit me on the way up. And you would have heard, boat motors, the noise travels a long way underwater. And I've heard, just as I was just about to hit the surface, I've heard boat motors going flat out. And I was like, this is a bit weird. And Greg had been diving probably only 500 metres to a K away from us. It wasn't far at all. And I hit the deck, and Andrew goes, Greg's been hit. And instantly you've just gone, oh no, how bad is this? And jumped on the sat phone, made a call, and just said, look, Greg's been hit. It was to Marcus Trump, his guy that was heading up the Abalone Association down there. And we normally had a helicopter. There was an old ab diver who had a helicopter down there. His name Bob Kent. And we were assuming we were going to have access to that helicopter to help us get out of there. But ended up being, we got a call on the sat phone a little bit later that wasn't going to be the case. And it was going to be up to us to make the evacuation out of there, basically. So we've pulled back up to the bay, and we've pulled up to Greg's boat, who Callum was driving. And I've jumped on boat, saw Callum, and he was just an absolute mess. And then went to the front of the boat, and then I've seen Greg, and he was in a terrible way. Kind of directed, Callum to do a couple of bits and pieces, and then jump back on the boat. And I just remember there was one moment, and I remember looking at Andrew, and he's gone, "Is it a white?" And it's like, "Mate, it's a white." And it's like he's not going to make it. And so there we are, 2 hours down a full drive track east of Esperance, kind of 3 guys, tractors, boats. Just even getting the boats out of the water with 3 guys is an issue, So we made that decision at that stage that Greg was in that bad a shape that we probably shouldn't move him, because it looked like if we were to lift him up, he'd probably fall in too. So we left him in the boat, put the trailer on the boat behind a car, and then we've stopped in probably 2 or 3 k's up the road. That's where all our caravans were and sleeping gear. And we thought, all right, well, we've got to try at least. It's just like, okay, let's go for a run and let's try to get him out of there. So, yeah, I remember just the visuals were absolutely, I guess, terrifying is probably one word. But he'd kind of, as he was working, he was on the bottom of the ocean, leaning forwards, knocking off abalone, and this thing came front on, and it engulfed him up to, his waist. And if it wasn't for the fact that, generally abalone divers, they'll run a spare air bottle on the back, a little pony bottle for reserve air, and a bit of a lead vest to disperse the weight over the whole torso instead of just a weight belt around the waist. And if it wasn't for those 2 things, he would have been in 2 pieces straight away. But as he was working his way out of the shark, however the heck he managed to do that, he just got torn apart. And like he had a flip top scalp, and Callum had kind of dealt with a bit of that. But his face was kind of spread apart, I guess you would say. So quite often we'll deco on Pure O2 as well. I just remember having that reg, the Pure O2 reg, trying to place it into Greg's face, but not really knowing which cavity to put it in. Like it was pretty horrific. And he still had a great white tooth embedded in his eye socket, on the inside of his eye socket. He had a great white tooth. But I guess, that's probably the terrifying bit of it. But success story in the end, because we managed to keep the blood loss down and drive out the full drive track. And then we met a ambulance out on the bitumen, got him in the ambulance, and he survived. So he's the crazy kid still have diving nowadays. So it's kind of a success story, I guess.
Yeah. Was Greg conscious throughout that?
At the first stages, he kind of was, but you couldn't really make out the words he was saying almost. I don't know if anyone's been around man groans before. They're quite a terrifying kind of noise when fully grown man is, when they're hurt and they're busted up and there's some not nice noises coming out. So he was still conscious and being able to make a little bit of noise, and we were trying to listen to sentences that he was saying.
Yeah, I guess he was hopefully always going to survive, given that he survived that first half an hour to an hour. And so he had, for whatever reason, something critical hadn't been nicked or cut. And so that was on his side. But what a dreadful experience for everyone. And I gather that same year you lost another friend up the coast or down the coast a bit as well to a shark.
Yeah, we did. So it was a series there in WA that was a really bad one. So one of my good friends, who was surfing down in the southwest, lost his life as well to attack. That was, heck of a year, that one.
Yeah. So this all knocked you around a fair bit, I gather, and you took a bit of time out from the water.
It's probably, I talk about this with Audie a little bit, but it was one of those times, like I live over in the southwest now, not down in Esperance, and I stopped out diving, I stopped surfing. I tried to get back in the water. I can't remember how long after, but just remember getting a surfboard under my arms. Esperance waters, beautiful, clear, nothing out of place at all. You can see a million miles in the ocean, and so no reason to fear anything. But I looked at the ocean different to I ever had before, and I was just full of fear. And I remember going and trying to re-enter into the water, and it just didn't happen. I started crying and throwing up and just couldn't get back in. So I tried to do the Aussie macho thing and just work through it and push through it. And went and forced the issue, went and sat out the back for 45 minutes, and same thing, just cried, threw up. And I think it was at that point I probably had to recognise that something was actually going on, and that seems crazy to say 4 letters of PTSD, but I think I'd just seen a little bit too much, and it was affecting me, and I had to go and get that sorted before I could re-enter the water and actually enjoy myself back in the ocean again.
Russell, how was this for you? Obviously not being directly involved, but seeing your friend suffer like this, was that must have been tough, and what were you able to do to help Shanan?
This was probably before Shanan and I even got close, but I have heard about him speak about it and share his experiences. I think Shanan himself found it took him a while to find a little bit of peace. I don't think he let too many people in back then. So it's kind of like that, like Shanan said, we tried to Aussie it, and it wasn't working for him. And it was more, I'd say, his wife now that would have helped him the most.
Have you had similar situations where, stuff has gone on in the water and you've struggled to get back in, or you've been lucky enough to miss anything major like that?
No, not so much in the water, but definitely in my fire brigade days, because you're always around death, it feels like, and that's kind of why I'm not in the fire brigade now, because a couple of incidents happened, and it basically was getting real life lessons, and I ended up quitting, and that's why I'm like a full-time photographer now. It's just I just had enough of kind of seeing that stuff. Yeah, it's more, I'd say it was the fire brigade days that taught me the most lessons.
Yeah, well, I've worked for a while in the ambulance service here in South Australia, and I think the fireys and the police actually get the worst of it, because you still go to the jobs where you don't even bother to call us because there's no point, and you're responsible for cleaning up the mess and hosing out the cars and all that sort of stuff, where there's no point calling the health professionals. So I can't imagine the stuff that you guys would deal with that we never even get the call to. So yeah, I can sense that must be tough.
I was trying to think about that the other day, actually, because it's one incident in particular why I quit, and I was wondering why it was that one and not others. And I think it's more the fact that she died basically in my arms. I think that was heavier, and obviously we had ambulance officers at that scene, but the ones where the previous ones, and I'd gone to so many, like suicides and house fires and stuff like that, and they're already passed away. They felt like they had no effect. I can remember those days just, if I'd go to a suicide and house fire and I'd come home like nothing even happened. It was just part of the job. But that one, it just made me reflect more on my own life than anything.
It's very strange how some incidents can trigger an emotion where others seem to have very little effect. And some people have described it to me as, everyone's got a bucket, and at some point the bucket will overflow and can just take one more drop on one day, and suddenly the bucket starts leaking when you thought it was all watertight. And I think for very experienced long-time members of some of these emergency services, it can just be that one case that sometimes pushes you over the edge, or it can be a case that has some particular significance and maybe you don't even realise why it is. But obviously in Shannon's case, this is pretty obvious why those two events in that year would be so profound and have such a dramatic impact on your mental health. So you guys, I don't know if you have a role in this, Russell, but Shanan, I know you've been, I think, talking about this a bit now. You've both done a bit of public speaking around some of this stuff. Shanan, are you trying to help other people from your experiences?
Yeah, for sure. I think Russ mentioned a little bit earlier, probably like I'd even say as little as 5 years ago, 5 to 7 years ago, I would never in my life would have imagined that I'd be public speaking or doing podcasts like this and actually sharing experiences and things that have happened to me. But I guess the motivation, I didn't even realise how therapeutic for myself it would be, even though it's probably when I first started actually talking in general, it's probably the hardest 6 months of my life, going from an Aussie male that never talked about anything ever and just masked feelings and emotions with alcohol and bravado, to being able to actually communicate on a level that you can talk about your feelings. And I know the benefit now of seeking out professional help and getting healthy vices and using that support network around you. And I, unfortunately, for quite a long time, didn't have a support network around me. And since seeking out that help and making those changes, and I think one of the biggest things has been conscious decision making. Whereas for so many years, as a young adult, and even as moving on up to 35, I wasn't making any conscious choices. Life was happening to me and I was just reacting. Whereas I finally got to a place where it's like, okay, I'm going to actually start setting some goals and trying to shoot in a direction that is positive for me, my family and everyone around me, instead of being a burden to them. I know that's been life-changing for me for the better. And if through shared experience we can, Russ and I are doing a bit of keynote speaking together, and it seems like we've actually, had some impact on some people and some feedback where they might actually reach out. Because I think if they look at guys like Russ and myself and go, okay, if these two melon heads can talk about their feelings, hopefully we can too, and maybe go seek out some help and try to steer our lives in a little bit better direction. If I don't have the medical background and, I've never felt like I've been able to give probably to community in too many different ways. It's been quite a selfish life I've lived on on some fronts. So to be able to actually feel like you could make a difference to someone's life through a shared experience, it's probably the best thing and the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Well, I think we can't emphasise that message enough, and fortunately more and more blokes are starting to talk, express their feelings and make it cool to do so. So I absolutely applaud that you guys are doing that. So let's lighten the mood a little bit, because there's been some really positive stuff come out of this. Tell me about the Shark Eyes project.
Yeah, it's been kind of exciting. That has probably started off as a bit of a labour of love, to be honest. I think due to, we've heard about the Greg attack. I used to basically Shark Eyes. It started off as a shark mitigation strategy where basically it's a big set of eyeballs. And I used to silicone on the back of all my wetsuits a big set of eyeballs. And that was just purely because personally I'd seen sharks change their behaviour once they knew they'd been spotted. They just became more cautious. So then we started looking into a bit more of the science of why that happened. And my sister, she's a marine scientist, and I got her to start delving into, eye spots and biomimicry just to see if there was any merit behind what I'd seen. Found out that nature had been using eye spots as an effective means to prevent attack for a long time. So basically, that's how Shark Eyes came about. We have the heavy water training that runs off that. And we have some other water products and wetsuits and other bits and pieces, but it all originated with the shark deterrent and the mitigation strategy.
Yeah, so there's stuff for divers. You can have some eyeballs on your scuba tanks. You can have on the back of your head with a mast strap. It might keep the magpies from swooping me as well if I wear it when I'm out for my morning run.
Yeah, welcome on the school kids' helmets.
But I do like the idea more than painting my surfboard like a black and white sea snake, I think. And I definitely don't want to wear the sea snake wetsuit. So I think the eyeballs carry a bit more punch. And actually and I know that, and you've said this yourself, that the science of this hasn't truly been tested, but there's a lot of good anecdote and a lot of common sense and some science in terms of what we see in nature with mimicry and so forth. So there's every reason to think that it can be effective, but very difficult to test, I know. When you see people swimming in open water with great whites and you see them staring at the shark, and the shark behaves in a very different fashion, as you've mentioned, I'm sure it's the one you don't see coming as the one that's going to bite you. So if they think you've seen them, that would be very reassuring. And, even if the science isn't there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but even if the science isn't there, even if it's a placebo thing that helps people get in the water and enjoy themselves and become fitter and better for that, even that's, good enough for me.
And if you're feeling more confident in the water, even if it was a placebo, which obviously we don't believe it is, if you're sending off those signals of confidence and acting less like prey, that's a win in itself. There's a really interesting study. I think he's from South Oz, actually. He might be from your motherland there. Professor Neil Jordan, he does a fair bit of work with the Taronga Zoo. It's a study, there's no direct science with our product, but probably one worthwhile mentioning is this example, because it's the only time I've seen any formal studies done where somebody has tried to protect something else by the use of eye spots, fake eyes instead of nature itself being proven through. So over in Botswana, there was lions were hitting cattle, and basically they needed to come up with a low-cost method to prevent the lions from hitting the cattle. Dr. Neil Jordan decided to paint eyes on the cows' bums. And so he did a 4-year study. It was 2008 cows or something or other. He painted a third of the herd. He left bare bummed. A third of the herd, he had little crosses he put on them, and then a third he had eyes. And I haven't got the exact numbers, so don't reference me on this one by any means, but it was something like over the 4 years, 48 or 68 cows got hit that were bare bummed. A lower percentage got hit with crosses, showing that crosses did make a little bit of an advantage of not getting hit. But then not one cow in 4 years got hit that had eyes on its bum.
Yeah, well, there's a guy you've probably also heard of in South Australia, Charlie Houveniers, who's a marine scientist who's done a lot of work on white sharks with Shark Shield and other shark electric deterrents, and comparing the South African experience with the South Australian experience, I think, where, as you know, in South Africa, the sharks tend to ambush from down deep and come up and hit the seals from underneath, whereas in Australia they tend to ambush in a different way. And I think whilst the jury's still out about those shark shields and so forth, what he has discovered is that anything that puts the shark off even for a moment means that they don't do that very destructive ambush first attack, and they're more likely to be a bit circumspect and come and have a test bite or a bit of a poke around before they commit, because energy is so important in wild animals, and they don't want to waste any if it's a little bit uncertain that the result's going to be successful. So if your eye spots slow them down and make them come in for a look, it means you've got a chance to respond. So Russell, I've seen on the website that yourself and Greg Pickering and a number of other people are featured on the website. Have you got any official involvement in this? Are you an investor or a user of the product?
I've spruced it up enough. I should be on a percentage. I'll tell you that. I'll hit up Shannon. I'll send him an invoice. But no, I'm just I use the product, and my son uses the product that surfs. And obviously, I've heard Shannon talk about it quite a lot, and he's easily convinced me for sure. But we just did a trip down Esperance, and the water we're just doing some of the new a product range for the new wetsuits, and I've never really seen how good they look, because Shannon was diving pretty deep, and I'm trying to take photos for above diving down myself, and you'd lose Shannon completely. You wouldn't even see him, maybe parts of his spear gun if you're lucky, but you could definitely see the eyes, so that they really do stand out. So yeah, I'm just using myself personally.
So Russell, what's going on with you now? Have you got any projects underway?
I'm actually just starting a project called Desert Light, which is, it will eventually be a foundation, and it's taking photography out to the outback, to communities, Aboriginal communities, and also making photography available to young minds with mental health problems or disabilities. So it's been a bit of a long process. It's been my idea, but I've definitely copied one of my mates, Quinn Beardman, who's got Boondaroo Music, who is helping me get it off the ground. So, yeah, that's the biggest project. I'm still trying to do commercial work and some brand work, but that's definitely been my full focus. And I'm just about to go up to Kununurra, 3 or 4 hours inland to teach photography, so it should be good. And it's a great way to give back. And this came because of Boondaroo Music, and Quinn would be up there teaching music, and if there's a couple of stragglers, I would just pass them my camera and let them shoot, and we could see what the camera was doing for the kids. So it should be interesting.
Sounds great. And Kununurra's got some fantastic caving up there too, so you should hook up with the locals and check some of the caves out. I could talk all day to you fellas. I think you're the epitome of the Aussie knockabouts who have done more than the occasional thing in your lifetimes, and not only great adventurers, but pretty inspirational too. With some significant strife and struggles in your lives, but coming out the other side with some amazing lessons learned and imparting that to other people, especially, sharing stuff about mental health and spreading the word that it's pretty cool to talk to people and get help when it's needed. Shannon, thank you very much for sharing your stories. And Russell, thanks so much for talking about your creative works in the water and bringing your mate along for a chat as well. It's been awesome to talk to both of you.
Up to be +1. Thanks heaps for having us, eh?
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Cheers, guys.
Had to be epic.
Cheers for that.
Well, that's the show for today. Thanks for joining me. If you want any more information, you can check out the podcast website at realriskpodcast.com.